Yes, I will live and die for him. If her ever comes and makes me love him in spite of myself, and you must do the best you can.
cried Joe, losing patience with poor Teddy.
I've done my best, but you won't be reasonable, and it's selfish of you to keep teasing for what I can't give. I shall always be fond of you, very fond indeed, as a friend, but I'll never marry you, and the sooner you believe it, the better for both of us. So now,
That speech was like gunpowder. Laurie looked at her a minute, as if he did not quite know what to do with himself, then turned sharply away, saying in a desperate sort of tone, "You'll be sorry some day, Joe,"
oh, where are you going?
she cried, for his face frightened her. "To the devil," was the consoling answer. For a minute Joe's heart stood still, and he swung himself down the bank toward the river, but it takes much folly, sinner, misery to send a young man to a violent death. And Laurie was not one of the weak sort who are conquered by a single failure. He had no thought of a melodramatic plunge, but some blind instinct led him to fling hat and coat into his boat and row away with all his might, making better time up the river than he had ever done in any race. Joe drew a long breath and unclasped her hands as she watched the poor fellow trying to outstrip the trouble which he carried in his heart.
That will do him good, and he'll come home in such a tender, penitent state of mind that I shan't dare to see him.
She said, adding as she went slowly home, feeling as if she had murdered some innocent thing and buried it under the leaves.
Now I must go and prepare Mr. Lawrence to be very kind to my poor boy. I wish he'd love Beth. Perhaps he may in time, but I begin to think I was mistaken about her. Oh dear, how can girls live to have lovers and refuse them? I think it's dreadful.
Being sure that no one could do it so well as herself, she went straight to Mr. Lawrence, told the hard story bravely through, and then broke down, crying so dismally over her own insensibility that the kind old gentleman, though sorely disappointed, did not utter a reproach. He found it difficult to understand how any girl could help loving Laurie, and hoped she would change her mind. But he knew, even better than Joe, that love cannot be forced. So he took his head sadly, and resolved to carry his boy out of harm's way. For young impetuosity, parting words to Joe disturbed him more than he could confess. When Laurie came home, dead tired but quite composed, his grandfather met him as if he knew nothing, and kept up the delusion very successfully for an hour or two. But when they sat down together in the twilight, the time they used to enjoy so much, it was hard work for the old man to ramble on as usual, and harder still for the young one to listen praises of the last year's success, which to him now seemed like love's labours lost. He bore it as long as he could, then went to his piano and began to play. The windows were open, and Joe, walking in the garden with Beth, for once understood music better than her sister, for he plays Sonata Pathetique, and played it as he never did before.
That's very fine, I dare say, but it's sad enough to make one cry. Give us something gayer, lad.
Said Mr. Lawrence, whose old heart was full of sympathy, which he longed to show, but knew not how. Larry dashed into a liverlike strain, played stormily for several minutes, and would have got through bravely if in a momentary lull Miss Marsh's voice had not been heard calling
Joe, dear, come in. I want you.
just what Laurie longed to say, with a different meaning. As he listened, he lost his place, the music ending with a broken chord, and the musician sat silent in the dark.
I can't stand this.
Muttered the old gentleman. Up he got, groped his way to the piano, laid a kind hand on either of the broad shoulders, and said, as gently as a woman,
I know, my boy, I know.
no answer for an instant, when Laurie asked sharply, "Who told you?"
Joe herself.
"Then there's an end of it." And he shook off his grandfather's hand with an impatient motion, for though grateful for the sympathy, his man's pride could not bear a man's pity.
Not quite. I want to say one thing, and then there shall be an end of it.
returned Mr. Lawrence with unusual mildness. You won't care.
You won't care to stay at home now, perhaps?
I don't intend to run away from a girl. Joe can't prevent me seeing her, and I shall stay and do as long as I like, interrupted Laurie in a defiant tone.
Not if you are the gentleman I think you. I'm disappointed, but the girl can't help it, and the only thing left for you to do is to go away for a time. Where will you go?
Anywhere. I don't care what becomes of me. And Laurie got up with a reckless laugh and gritted on his grandfather's ear.
Take it like a man, and don't do anything rash, for God's sake. Why not go abroad, as you planned, and forget it?
I can't.
But you've been wild to go, and I promised you should when you got through college.